Kiyotaka Ayanokoji, the well-known light novel protagonist from Classroom Elite. He's well known by his fans for his intellect and especially his abilities gained from the White Room, an educational institution designed to create geniuses with exceptional talent, even if they weren't born one. However, how would he handle himself in a fight against Kazami Yuuji, the protagonist from Grisaia? Yuuji is a second-year high school student formerly known as Ace Number 9029, an assassin for the Japanese government agency. Both are similar in the sense that despite being exceptionally gifted, they would like to enjoy a normal life and move away from their environment of origin. Before we start, however, it's important to understand that we are currently using the strongest versions of each character, or simply when they were in their prime. Currently, Ayanokoji is nowhere near his prime, as after leaving the White Room, he stated in Year 2 Volume 2 that his strength has been decreasing, and to keep himself fit and build back the strength he's lost, he started to train more and more. We'll also need to make sure that both Ayanokoji and Yuuji are in character. As though it may not seem important, it actually is when determining who wins in a fight. A good example would be Goku vs Frieza. Most people think Goku would just speed blitz and no-diff him, but that's not within Goku's character. Goku is someone who likes to bring out a fighter's full potential and often holds back by a large amount. When fighting, as seen in the Tournament of Power, and even against someone like Vegeta, however, should the Earth or his loved ones be in danger, he won't hesitate to end the fight, even if he'd rather draw it out. As shown in Resurrection of F when Frieza blew up the planet, but Whis gave Goku a second chance by rewinding time. Goku did not hesitate to immediately transform into his strongest form at the time, Super Saiyan Blue, and kill Frieza. So Ayanokoji in his prime would be when he is 14 years of age, which is when he left the White Room. Yuuji's prime would be when he was still going under the name of Ace 9029, an assassin for the Japanese government. And his other form, of course, the drug-induced Yuuji, well, that's just not fair. Before we start the video, I'd like to remind you to please subscribe. Ayanokoji's physical strength is one of his best attributes when it comes to analyzing just how strong he is. Horikita was intrigued by Ayanokoji's physique and stated his back muscles and forearms were far above average. Kushida also noticed Ayanokoji's physique and said he was arguably better built than Sudo, who was an athlete and plays on the basketball team. In Year 1 Volume 5, Ayanokoji asked Sudo what the average grip strength for a high schooler student is. This was done to manipulate his score and not stand out, and Sudo stated it was about 60. This was the wrong number, and the average was stated to be around between 45 to 50. Ayanokoji also stated that with training, an individual can get their grip strength to surpass 100 kilograms. His grip strength later came into play during the fight against Ryuuen, Ishizaki, Ibuki, and Albert, when Ishizaki threw a punch at him in the light novel, and he simply caught it and squeezed. Ayanokoji's grip strength was so powerful that it immediately brought Ishizaki to his knees. He then goes on to hilariously describe Ishizaki's punch as the swat you might give an angry child. Keep in mind that Ayanokoji has been getting weaker ever since he left the White Room, and in turn, his grip strength has decreased. This doesn't stop him from defeating Hosen, however, who, despite stabbing him through the palm with a knife, could barely even move once Ayanokoji gripped Hosen's fist. Ayanokoji stated previously that Hosen was so strong that neither Ryuuen, Albert, or Manabu could defeat him. This is the same Manabu with an extensive martial arts background, and threw a kick at Ayanokoji who was so strong he stated it was a close call and could have knocked him out. The reason why Ayanokoji's physique is above average, as well as his grip strength, is due to extensive training in the White Room, an institution dedicated to challenging the nurture/nature argument when it comes to developing geniuses. The White Room isn't solely focused on the strength of the students, and more so focuses on the mental aspects. This isn't to downplay the White Room in any way, however. To achieve this physique, Ayanokoji was given a rigorous training exercise. This included a daily regimen of waking up at 7 AM, daily exercise, grip strength training, and spending 2 hours in the afternoon with intense physical training. The White Room is a state-of-the-art institution that holds the best equipment it has to offer, and Ayanokoji's generation was known for its difficulty. The fourth generation of the White Room was far above the human limit in terms of mental and physical aspects. Here's the first feat. Ayanokoji states here that kicking a hole through the elevator might be worth considering, meaning he thought he could do it. And since the anime confirms that it was stainless steel, we can make accurate calculations. These calculations concluded it was 1800 kilojoules, or wall level. So how does Yuuji compare? Although Yuuji wasn't born in a facility as advanced as the White Room, he was trained as a child soldier at a desolate terrorist academy, exceeding in hand-to-hand combat and becoming skilled with knife combat. He was so skilled, in fact, he surpassed both Asako, Kusabe, and Heath Oslo. Heath in particular was an international terrorist in charge of the Child Soldier Academy that Yuuji was taught in. As crazy as it sounds, Yuuji as a child was able to severely injure a fully grown grizzly bear with a stick before finishing it off with a gunshot. To put this into perspective, grizzly bears have a bite force of around 1200 per square inch. That very same bite force is powerful enough to crush a human skull. They're known to kill prey 6 times larger than their own body weight, with males averaging anywhere from 200 to 300 kg. The paw swipe of a grizzly bear alone is enough to knock a horse off its feet, and the fact that Yuuji as a child with a stick was able to severely injure a full-grown grizzly bear says a lot about his strength and speed. Yuuji was also at a disadvantaged state as he was nowhere near his prime at the time, and was constantly sent on missions to gain more experience as a child soldier. For this reason, strength will go to Yuuji. But how about speed? Ayanokoji's speed, while it's not having many feats in canon, is not to be underestimated. When it comes to feats regarding his current self, Ayanokoji is more quality over quantity. Like his physical strength, his speed was gained through numerous amounts of rigorous training in the White Room. In Year 2 Volume 7, Ayanokoji blitzed Ichika from 5 meters, and she attempted to react. However, Ayanokoji put an end to her attempt and completely pinned her in this small time frame. In this calculation below, adding an extra meter is valid, using 0.013 seconds as a time frame, which MIT studies counts equates to 6/0.013 equals 461.53, or supersonic. In Year 2 Volume 4, Ayanokoji faced off against Shiba and Tsukishira on the second uninhabited island exam. How this argument goes is that Shiba threw a punch and the sound of his fist rang through Ayanokoji's ears, despite the fact there was no impact. So if Shiba's fist didn't connect and yet made a loud noise, then the only explanation is that it created a sonic boom by surpassing the speed of sound. We must focus on the definition of rang because it fits perfectly with the context of the speed feat. This is because the ringing in Ayanokoji's ear would be caused by the loud sound of Shiba's fist. If there was no impact, there couldn't have been a loud sound that made Ayanokoji's ear ring without it being a sonic boom. Sonic booms are the only thing that doesn't need an impact to make a noise in a medium of air loud enough to ring a person's eardrum. This would make the feat anywhere from transonic to supersonic. Ayanokoji's race against Manabu was one of the first ever showings of just how fast he was. For context, in Year 1 Volume 5, Ayanokoji asked Manabu to run with all of his strength as he would not be holding back. Manabu accepts, and the two race against each other in the relay race. Now, a common misconception about this feat is that Ayanokoji was giving it all his all and lost. This is false, as Ayanokoji claims that this is the fastest he's ever ran in the outside world, but not once does he claim that this is his limit. This is further proven when at the end, he says he's going to increase his speed even more. However, someone fell in front of him which rendered Ayanokoji unable to run faster and resulted in Manabu winning the race. This feat has been calced to peak human, but there's no agreed scaling for it. Yet, assuming that it is a peak human feat, however, it is insane when you think about it. You need to remember that Ayanokoji starting from Year 1 and onwards is no longer at his prime in terms of physicality. Ever since he left the White Room, he has been getting much weaker and is currently starting to exercise again to regain this original strength. All of Ayanokoji's showings are from a weaker version of himself, and yet nobody can even come close to matching him. This just goes to show how scary Ayanokoji would be had he not lost his strength after leaving the White Room. Even weakened, he has no equal whatsoever. Keep in mind that Ayanokoji's scaling for speed is still heavily debated. Some people believe he's just about peak human, others think subsonic, and I've seen some people believe he's high to hypersonic, which to put into perspective is missile levels of speed. So if you want it to really wank that high, you could just get him that high, I guess. As for Yuuji, Kazami, he's able to casually dodge multiple bullets at a point-blank range, most notably performing this feat against a Desert Eagle, which he'd have to move greater than 470 meters per second, which is supersonic levels of speed. For this reason, it seems as though Yuuji and Ayanokoji are more or less equal in terms of speed. Ayanokoji's stamina in his prime was easily at that of superhuman levels. He's been conditioned for engaging in long periods of physical activity due to the daily routine he had to follow in the White Room. This included 2 hours of swimming, with 30 minutes of said time being used for lessons and another 30 minutes for competitive racing. Swimming itself is a full body workout that engages many different muscle groups, which can lead to fatigue. Additionally, the resistance of the water requires more effort to move through compared to moving through air. This increased resistance can make swimming feel more tiring than other forms of exercise. 2 hours of their day was also dedicated to physical activities such as lifting weights and martial arts. When martial arts was first introduced, the instructors would not hold back on the children. They were relentlessly slammed into the ground, and even if they couldn't breathe or throw up, this was repeated until they no longer felt anything. Martial arts is not just throwing kicks and punches mindlessly. There is a lot of strategy, technique, skill involved in it. There is feinting, footwork, movement, evading, timing, countering, and so on. Ayanokoji would eventually be the sole student of the 4th generation of the White Room, where he would eventually surpass all the instructors who taught him in martial arts. Martial arts is a very strenuous activity, especially when it comes to fighting against experienced teachers. Ayanokoji's stamina was put to test numerous times, but most notably when his last exam involved fighting against several adult men. He was only a child at the time, but not only able to end the fight quickly, but keep up and not tire out against the men. Aside from enduring the hard conditions of the White Room, Ayanokoji's stamina also came into play during the second year uninhabited island exam. The terrain was unforgiving, with it resembling that of a forest, where even the most experienced students had trouble traversing the terrain. Despite all the downsides, Ayanokoji was able to move with ease and keep his stamina stable enough to be able to fight against Tsukishira and Shiba. This feat was performed by Year 2 Ayanokoji, who's weaker than Year 1 Ayanokoji, who was also far weaker than a Prime Ayanokoji. Yuuji, however, has extensive training from the military, as well as terrorist organizations, which piqued his human capabilities including stamina. He was able to beat 3 highly trained assassins all at once, and has survived multiple cuts, a gunshot wound, and a stab wound from a katana through the abdomen. In the visual novel equivalent, which is still canon to the series, he survived through all of these on top of torn muscles, which were an overdose effect from the booster and sedative drugs he sometimes uses to enhance his already superhuman levels of strength. It has many harmful side effects, however, which include broken bones that he suffered, and Yuuji is not only able to take more punishment than Ayanokoji, but his stamina is arguably even greater. Suffering life-threatening injuries is nothing to Yuuji, as he's been on missions that dictated life or death ever since he was a child. I could see an argument for them being comparable, but the fact of the matter is that Yuuji has still been able to fight despite suffering all those wounds. Most notably in a fight against his clone, who was just as skilled and strong as Yuuji, and on top of that used the same booster drugs that surpasses the level of already his skilled abilities, and for this reason, I believe stamina goes to Yuuji. Martial arts is an interesting one, as it's heavily discussed topics regarding just how many martial arts Ayanokoji knows. Some believe he knows them all, others think it's an extensive list, but it depends on the source material, as there's the anime and light novel, which have different showings for said topic. We're going to start with the light novel, but I'll be sure to mention which martial arts was used for simplicity's sake. Judo. Judo was introduced to the 4th generation of the White Room when Ayanokoji was 4. It is an unarmed, modern Japanese martial art, with the objective being to throw an opponent, immobilize them with a pin, or force an opponent to submit with a joint lock or a choke. Ayanokoji displayed his knowledge of Judo when he encountered Ryuen's attacks and threw him into the ground in Season 2, Episode 12, Classroom Elite. Boxing is another martial art taught in the White Room. It is a combat sport, and a martial art in which 2 people, usually wearing protective gloves and other protective equipment such as hand wraps and mouth guards, throw punches at each other for a predetermined amount of period of time in a boxing ring. It has many variations such as savate and kickboxing, and some of these variations Ayanokoji used. Ayanokoji displayed his knowledge of boxing in Season 2, Episode 12 of Classroom Elite, when he used boxing footwork 2 times. The first instance was dodging Albert's rear hooks and then creating distance between him to further avoid any more blows, and the second time is when Ibuki attempts to land Capoeira kicks on Ayanokoji. He uses footwork to accurately evade her attacks and close the distance and knock her out. Jeet Kune Do is a hybrid martial art conceived and practiced by martial artist Bruce Lee. It was formed from Lee's experience in unarmed fighting and self-defense. The core of Jeet Kune Do is the interception of the opponent, making corresponding responses or countering attacks that strike at incoming attacks. It is an eclectic martial art, meaning it incorporates its techniques from several other martial arts. The martial arts incorporated into Jeet Kune Do include Wing Chun, Taekwondo, boxing, and Jiu-Jitsu. Ayanokoji shows knowledge of Jeet Kune Do specifically in the anime during the final fight against Ryuen. He keeps a calm composure and never is the aggressor in the fight. He simply dodges, counterattacks Ryuen until he eventually finishes him off for good. Karate. Shortly after Judo was introduced, karate was also implemented into the White Room's curriculum. It is a Japanese martial art that involves the usage of punching, kicking, knee strikes, elbow strikes, and open-handed techniques such as knife hands, spear hands, and palm heel strikes. In some modern styles of karate, they also teach grappling, throws, joint locks, restraints, and vital point strikes are also taught. Ayanokoji used karate in Season 2, Episode 12 of Classroom Elite's anime, when he parried Albert's strikes and punched him in what seems to be the solar plexus. Ayanokoji also seems to implement a lot of elbow strikes when using a finishing combo on Ishizaki, and most notably when he chops Ibuki in the neck to knock her out. We're now going to cover the other martial arts that Ayanokoji has shown knowledge of in the anime. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a self-defense martial art and combat sport based on grappling, ground fighting, and submission holds. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu focuses on taking one's opponent down to the ground, gaining a dominant position, and using several techniques to force them into submission via joint locks or chokeholds. Ayanokoji shows his knowledge of this when Ishizaki attempts to hit Ayanokoji with a cross punch, and he counters it by grabbing Ishizaki's arm and forcing him into a submission. Muay Thai, sometimes referred as Thai boxing, is a combat sport that uses stand-up striking, sweeps, and various clinching techniques. It combines the usage of fists, elbows, knees, shins, and Ayanokoji displays knowledge of Muay Thai by grabbing onto Albert, kneeing him in the face, and finishing Ishizaki with an elbow. Wing Chun is a concept-based martial art form of Southern Chinese Kung Fu and a close-quarter system of self-defense. It is martial arts style characterized by its focus on close-quarter hand-to-hand combat, rapid-fire punches, and straightforward efficiency. Ayanokoji shows his knowledge in Wing Chun twice against Ryuuen. First by using rapid-fire punches to get Ryuuen off of him, and second to parry Ryuen's blows before slamming him into the ground. Krav Maga is an Israeli martial art developed for the Israeli Defense Forces. It is derived from a combination of techniques used in Aikido, Judo, Karate, boxing, and wrestling. It's known for its focus on real-world situations and its extreme efficiency. Ayanokoji displayed knowledge of Krav Maga twice, once by using an elbow block to block Ibuki's Capoeira kick, and second time by catching, countering, and punishing Ryuen's first attacks. Taekwondo is a Korean martial art involving punching and kicking techniques. Ayanokoji shows off his knowledge of Taekwondo by finishing Albert with a kick to the face and hitting Ryuuen with a traditional Taekwondo elbow. Russian Systema. Systema is a Russian martial art. Training includes hand-to-hand combat, grappling, knife fighting, and firearms training. The continuous throwing of fists at Ryuen's face until he breaks his guard that Ayanokoji gives to Ryuuen after judo slamming is reminiscent of that. As for Yuuji, it's directly stated in the visual novels he has knowledge of Muay Thai, Judo, boxing, Aikido, Krav Maga, and Taido. The anime is still a part of Classroom Elite's canon and is overseen by the author Kinugasa. That would mean that Ayanokoji has knowledge of over 10 different styles of martial arts, compared to Yuuji who only knows 5. For this reason, Ayanokoji takes martial arts. But how about hacks? Ayanokoji's list of abilities is interesting to say the least. For Volume 0, Ayanokoji had shown off a decent amount of abilities gained from the White Room. Ayanokoji has been able to hide his presence numerous times, with the individuals he chooses to track not knowing of his presence until he reveals himself. In Year 1, Volume 1 of Classroom Elite, Ayanokoji followed Horikita at night, who went to meet with her older brother. Ayanokoji was able to trail her effortlessly, without her even knowing he was around, until he revealed himself. Manabu is a trained martial artist and should have senses that are far better than average, and yet he wasn't able to notice Ayanokoji until he was directly grabbed. In Year 2, Volume 7, Ayanokoji was actually able to sneak up on Ichika Amazawa, a student of the White Room. Ichika is from the 5th generation, which the curriculum is at the difficulty of level 4. This isn't to underestimate Ichika in any way, however, as all her training in terms of physical abilities should be similar to Ayanokoji's generation, it's simply the difficulty rating that is different. White Room students are seen as superhuman compared to normal students in Classroom Elite, and yet a weaker Ayanokoji was able to hide his presence from Ichika. Ayanokoji does this another time, but is able to hide his presence from 5 students. This was done against Ishizaki, Hiyori, Isayama, Hitoya, and Morofuji. Information analysis is the ability to gain information on others by analyzing. Ayanokoji has notably shown this ability through fighting. It was done in Volume 0 of Classroom Elite when Ayanokoji was in his final exam. He was up against several armed men who he knew immediately were physically stronger than him in muscle mass alone. He also analyzed Albert's physique and knew he was easily the strongest of Ryuen's group, and he couldn't play around with them, especially after taking one of his punches and realizing how strong he was. When fighting against Ryuuen, he noted that Ryuuen wasn't a trained fighter and had his own unique style developed from growing up as a delinquent. When he fought against Nanase, he recognized that she knew karate, and once she entered her Boku mode, he stated she had the strength to knock out an adult man. Ayanokoji's senses are far above what a normal humans are. He was able to sense that there was a presence following him and Nanase throughout the entire day during the inhabited island exam. This was confirmed to be Kushida and Ichika, even adds on to Ayanokoji's statement by saying he was aware of her being nearby, but didn't bother to confront her. His senses are most notable in combat, as he's able to counter, react, and dodge against attacks that are practically impossible for others. This includes his fight with Nanase, where he repeatedly dodges her attacks even when she goes Boku mode, where her technique becomes so much more powerful that she's capable of knocking out adult men. Ayanokoji knew there was someone nearby, and decided that retaliating against Nanase would be no good, and decided to simply dodge. Even when Nanase closes the distance between them and grabs Ayanokoji's clothing to make it impossible for him to dodge, he's still able to do so. In that same Year 2 Volume 4, Ayanokoji fights against Tsukishiro and Shiba, and just before he throws a punch, he states he feels a cold mark on his neck and dodges an attack from Tsukishiro almost instantly. Ayanokoji's adaptation is one of the most important things to his strength. The ability to copy techniques is an ability that Ayanokoji is no stranger to. This stems from him being a genius of adaptation, being able to improve at an incredible speed in all sorts of things. He showcases this ability during Year 2 Volume 8, where he goes skiing with Ryuuen and Kito. He needed to be able to catch up to them to prevent them from crashing into one another. And while it's the middle of skiing, improves his technique by watching and copying both Ryuuen and Kito. Accelerated development is the ability to increase your skill in something at a faster rate than normal. This seems to be a trait that most White Room students have, but Ayanokoji has far more showings for it. We learned that in Volume 0 that Ayanokoji had a fight record of 127 wins, 17 losses, and went on a streak of 64 wins. This was only second to Shiro, another White Room student of the 4th generation, who had a record of 135 wins and only 9 losses. Ayanokoji at first was weaker than Shiro in terms of martial arts, but was able to soon adapt to Shiro's fighting ability and surpass him. The gap between them widened so much that Shiro stated that it had been years since he's been able to beat Ayanokoji. By repeatedly losing to Shiro, Ayanokoji was able to absorb that information and get better over time. But Ayanokoji doesn't just adapt. There's more. Ayanokoji states that he's a verbal and visual learner and sees new things to learn as connected by broad and shallow lines. This was shown in Year 2 Volume 8 when he had to prevent Ryuuen and Kito from crashing into one another during skiing. He went from being nowhere near as good as them to learning how to ski better by copying their skills and improving on them almost instantly. Resistance to fear inducement. Fear manipulation can inflict fear on the target, which can incapacitate them by making them too scared to fight back. However, due to his time spent in the White Room, and along with it all the trauma he had suffered, Ayanokoji has stated time and time again he has no capacity to feel fear. Ryuuen even tested this statement by hurting Ayanokoji as hard as he could, with Ayanokoji stating all he felt was pain. His father's gaze was stated to bring the principal of Advanced Nurturing High School to a sweaty and nervous mess, but Ayanokoji felt nothing when the same gaze was put on him. It's actually the opposite, with Ayanokoji being able to induce fear onto others, most notably Kei and Hirata, who both stated his eyes were cold and empty, and he looked as if he could kill someone. And we've actually heard more statements about his eyes being pretty fearful, like in Year 1 Volume 11.5 with Tsukishiro and Chabashiro. Due to all of his fighting experience from the White Room, Ayanokoji's pain tolerance is at an abnormal rate. He has stated previously he was constantly slammed and attacked during martial arts training to the point where he couldn't breathe. This continued until he no longer felt anything. He's still able to feel pain, but he can shake it off no matter how severe the attack. This was put to the utmost test when Hosen stabbed Ayanokoji through the palm with a fruit knife, and despite suffering a devastating injury, he barely even flinched. Ayanokoji was able to remain calm and keep his poker face despite the alarming amount of pain he was in. Ayanokoji has been taught in martial arts, and most notably has been trained to attack the vital areas of the human body. This is shown during Year 1 and Year 2. When he was fighting against Ryuuen and his goons, he aims for Albert's solar plexus and throat. When fighting against Tsukishiro, he aims for his nose to cause tears to flow and blind him, which in turn leads to him being able to overwhelm Tsukishiro in their fight. Ayanokoji is a very analytical fighter and will target the weak points of the human body to win. And as for Yuuji, he has various lists of hacks that include weapon mastery. As a child, he was trained to use a large range of weapons such as pistols, sniper rifles, and knife combat. Statistics amplification. There was a special drug created by Oslo designed for soldiers like Yuuji to boost their physical strength and speed. Stealth mastery. As to be expected of a soldier and assassin, Yuuji's stealth is what gives him his reputation for being so deadly. He was able to infiltrate Heath Oslo's building, an international terrorist able to evade capture against the best government agencies the world has to offer. Information analysis. Yuuji was able to tell that Michiru was faking her tsundere personality to attract male attention. Acrobatics. An ability gained from his training, which has been used many times to give Yuuji the advantage, is physical confrontations. This was most notably used to avoid himself being cut in half as he jumped over a large chair. Enhancing senses. One of Yuuji's best abilities are his senses, which are so great he was able to hear enemies which were 100 kilometers away by simply putting his ear to the ground. Berserk mode. Yuuji throughout the series actually holds back and has some sort of safety pin that if released could cause him to let out all of his bloodlust and fight with no restraint. However, this has been taken off by command rather than Yuuji literally taken off himself. Technology manipulation. Yuuji has shown proficiency in bomb defusal during his many missions as an assassin. Supernatural willpower, even after being shot, stabbed, and about to overdose due to the booster drugs that causes your muscles to be torn and bones break apart, he was able to fight. Photographic memory. Funnily enough, just like Ayanokoji, Yuuji also possesses photographic memory, though not as good as Ayanokoji's by no means. By no means is it bad, because with this ability he's able to memorize entire buildings down to the ventilation windows. Fear inducement. He left Yumiko trembling and in absolute fear after she simply looked into his eyes. Pressure points. Yuuji is also knowledgeable on pressure points and implements it in his fighting style. Yuuji's hacks are not only superior to Ayanokoji's, but he's shown to have more available. So after going all over this, who wins? Well, let's go over a few scenarios that Ayanokoji and Yuuji would find themselves in. Round 1. Hand-to-hand combat. In a hand-to-hand fight, Ayanokoji would be no slacker, as due to having more experience in one-on-one fights and having more knowledge on martial arts, he'd be able to make up for the overwhelming advantage in strength that Yuuji has. Ultimately, it would come down to who's faster and who has better stamina. Yuuji and Ayanokoji seem to have more or less equal speed, so stamina would be the deciding factor. With Yuuji's stamina being superior to Ayanokoji, it would be a long battle, but eventually Ayanokoji would slip up and allow Yuuji to deal the finishing blow. Now, it's arguable that Ayanokoji's accelerated development may be able to adapt to Yuuji, but Yuuji is an analytical fighter as well. He'd slowly realize as he continues to trade blows with Ayanokoji that he's improving and starting to outpace him. Yuuji is not one who likes to have drawn out battles, because mind you, as an assassin, he prioritizes dealing the finishing blow. And Ayanokoji would often be on the defensive, as he can't just be contending with Yuuji's strength. So if Yuuji, for some out of character reason, decides to continue to let the fight go on, then Ayanokoji would eventually just do some Broly type stuff and adapt to him and finish him. But since that's not in character for Yuuji, he'd go into the fight with the intent of killing Ayanokoji and win with arguably high difficulty. Round 2 is with melee weapons. Okay, so of course Yuuji would beat Ayanokoji hand to hand, but would giving them a melee weapon perhaps change the difficulty? Well, no. Even though Ayanokoji has been stated to be proficient with a knife, he's nowhere near on Yuuji's level. I've seen him time and time again, him preferring to use knives, especially in close quarter combat. Ayanokoji wouldn't have time to adapt, as the more Yuuji attacks, the more overwhelmed he'd get. He'd then start to rely on defense, but he would have already suffered so much damage that it'd be pointless. Yuuji would win this round with either the same amount of difficulty or arguably mid difficulty, as Yuuji is just that much better at melee than Ayanokoji. And I don't think I have to do a round with ranged weapons, as Yuuji is an excellent sniper and has been dealing with guns since he was a child. Ayanokoji doesn't have knowledge of guns and is only familiar with stun guns. In fact, you could even let it be an all-out battle, give Ayanokoji guns or knives with the intention to kill, but if this really is an all-out battle, that means you not only give Yuuji's safety pin to be released, you also get him on booster drugs that increase his physical strength and speed. Ayanokoji and Yuuji were already more or less equal in speed, but with this Yuuji, it would surpass him by many times over. It would go from high difficulty to even lower mid difficulty, as crazy as it sounds. The only thing keeping Ayanokoji comparable with Yuuji is the superior knowledge of martial arts as well as equal speed, but those are thrown out the window if Yuuji is at his absolute strongest. But with that being said, Ayanokoji vs Yuuji isn't close, especially in certain scenarios, as previously discussed. Yuuji would win against Ayanokoji with mid to high difficulty, but results are still the same. Yuuji would win.